a majestic view of paradise, with countless celestial figures around Jesus Christ and Mary, his mother. One of the largest canvas paintings in the entire world, measuring 22 meters wide. In today's episode of Infinite Journey, you will explore Tintoretto's Paradise and the Republic of Venice, where remarkable figures like Marco Polo lived. Where to this day one of the most beautiful carnivals in the world takes place. We usually think of Carnival as a Brazilian celebration, purely Brazilian. Here in Venice, Carnival is a tradition that goes back more than 850 years. Take the opportunity to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. In Venice, political power and the power of the church were and still are neighbors to this day. The Basilica of St. Mark was built practically as an annex to the Doge's palace. But in 1797, Venice's 1,100-year history as an independent state came to an end. Napoleon Bonaparte, of course, invaded this place. He ended the Republic, which in the following century became part of the Kingdom of Italy. And the Doge's palace became a museum in a city that, well, you can see it there, right? It's a big museum. A big museum. If you come to Venice with little time, there's a good chance you'll choose this square to see this cathedral. The problem is that a lot of people think the same, right? See? Even on a rainy day, walking here in the middle of all these people isn't easy. Now, if the weather allows, there are almost endless interesting places to visit in Venice. Starting, of course, with the Basilica and the Doge's Palace, which is right next to it. The palace that stands today is not the same as in the time of Giustiniano, the ruler who ordered the theft of St. Mark's remains. A fire in the 10th century practically destroyed the first palace, and by that time, the bureaucracy of the Republic had made the State Council so large that it was necessary to build an even bigger building. The State Council was a kind of parliament that elected the Doge in the Republic of Venice. And besides serving as the seat of government, the palace also served as the residence for the Doge. 3 other fires damaged the palace in the 15th and 16th centuries, and the renovations took place during the Renaissance. Even so, the architects decided to keep the original Gothic style. The meetings of the Council of State that elected the Doge took place in this huge hall here, measuring 53 meters by 25. That's more than a quarter of the area of an official soccer field, and all of it inside a building. The council was fundamental in the Republic of Venice. It was quite democratic. The council included representatives from families born in the city, regardless of poverty or nobility. I had to come here to the middle of the hall so we could see one of the largest paintings in the world. This artwork here is 22 meters by 9. Can you imagine? Can you see behind me how big this artwork is? It's also by one of the greatest painters in the world, Jacopo Robusti, known worldwide as Tintoretto. He's one of the greatest Venetian painters, one of the most famous in the world. Son of a local dyer. You got the nickname, right? Famous for the speed with which he painted, he was also called Il Furioso. He was a student of Titian, another Renaissance master, but only for a short time. They say that Titian became so jealous of Tintoretto's talent that he expelled him from the studio. People from all over the world who come to Venice make a point of seeing this work. And it's phenomenal. Can you see the number of figures represented there? The gigantic canvas that decorates the Great Hall of the Council of State shows about 500 religious figures in detail. Every character, important characters are here, from Jesus to Our Lady, to the archangels, including major events from the New Testament, such as the Annunciation. At the center of it all, we see the Empyrean heaven, which in the cosmology of the philosopher Aristotle was the highest of the celestial paradises. It was right in front of the Empyrean that the Doge and the representatives of the wealthiest families of Venice sat during the council meetings. It was from there that they followed the debates and decided the fate of the Republic.
Since the Middle Ages,
The city of Venice, which was a republic,
had a Senate. This was the Senate gallery.
and the one who stayed here was the Doge, the equivalent of a king, ruler of Venice. And the place was known as the prayer room because every day he prayed for the senators to come here and help decide the fate of Venice. Here in the Doge's palace, there are two works by two of my favorite artists. This one is one of them. This one is called Vision of the Apocalypse by Hieronymus Bosch, who is also the author of The Garden of Earthly Delights, a very important and fundamental work. Here we see exactly how this painter, surrealist long before Salvador Dali, imagined the end of the world, the day when God would come to judge humans. Looking at Bosch's work, especially with the actual piece right in front of me, is fascinating. It couldn't have been easy to be a prisoner of the Doge. A man so powerful, even though he was democratically elected, was a man who ruled this place with a very firm hand and could throw anyone in prison. This is the only one that's open. And we can see the thickness of the walls. They all had bars in front, like we can see in this other one. You definitely wouldn't want to spend a night here. Venice had already been a powerful and wealthy republic for over 550 years when one of its most famous sons was born. Marco Polo, the merchant and explorer who discovered the Silk Road, a network of routes that in the Middle Ages connected Europe to Asia. Son and nephew of explorers, Marco Polo was born in 1254 in Venice and only met his father and uncle when they returned from a trip to Asia 15 years later. There they did business with the emperor of the Yuan dynasty, Kublai Khan, grandson of the legendary and bloodthirsty Genghis Khan. At the age of 15, Marco Polo set out with his family on an expedition through Asia. There they met Emperor Kublai Khan again, who was said to have been impressed by Marco Polo's learning and humility. In another demonstration of his innovative abilities, Marco Polo was appointed diplomatic envoy by the Emperor of Mongolia and for 24 years traveled across the continent doing business. Only after that did he return to Venice, his homeland, which at that time was at war with Genoa, the other maritime republic of Italy. He joined the war and was imprisoned. After being released, he finally decided to settle down. Marco Polo got married, had 3 children, and became rich doing what he knew best, buying and selling goods. When he returned from his first journey through Asia, Marco Polo wrote a book to tell about his travels, and the book became a bestseller while he was still alive. It was translated into several languages. The book, The Travels of Marco Polo, influenced other explorers in the following century, including Christopher Columbus, the discoverer of America. It's important for us to remember that the book was released and became a success.
Years before the invention of the printing press by the German Gutenberg,
Marco Polo was a mind far ahead of his time. It's not an exaggeration to say he was already an influencer of his time centuries ago. One of the great mysteries of Venice, still unsolved to this day, is the fate of Marco Polo's tomb. He was one of the most famous Venetians in history. He requested in his will to be buried next to his father here in the Church of San Lorenzo, but the tomb disappeared. The children who play soccer enthusiastically in the square in front probably have no idea of the historical importance of this building, which stopped being a church in the 19th century and is now a cultural center. Well, it's closed for renovation. Everything is so beautiful that it couldn't help but inspire the artists of the time. And in the 17th century, two of the most famous Italian classical composers were born here, almost at the same time. One of them was Antonio Vivaldi, the composer of one of the most well-known symphonies of all time. I'm sure you know it, The Four Seasons. Of Vivaldi's Four Seasons, spring is the most well-known. But it's also worth listening to a bit of the third movement of Summer. Is it dynamic, dramatic? Another Venetian composer from the 17th century, contemporary of Vivaldi, is Tommaso Albinoni, author of the Sad Adagio by Albinoni. Funeral. We usually think of
Carnival as a Brazilian celebration, purely Brazilian.
and sometimes we forget a few things. First, that it's a celebration of religious origin.
One possibility is that it comes from Latin, right?
Carne levarium.
Which would mean to carry the meat.
All the meat there was to eat before the Lenten fast began. A Christian tradition. And the other thing we forget is that we didn't invent this idea of going out
Through the streets in masks, joking around, changing values, right? Inverting values during Carnival to make
jokes and yourself dress.
in different clothes, for example.
Masked. Here in Venice, Carnival is a tradition that's more than 850 years old. I stopped here to rest a little after walking so much. I stopped in front of this shop that sells beautiful masks. They're made of papier-mâché. They're made by local artists. There are all kinds, right? But the most interesting one, I'm even thinking about buying one for myself, is the plague doctor's mask. When the plague struck, the doctors would go out wearing huge masks to protect their noses from the bad smell coming from the streets and also to be able to treat the sick. I'll see if I can find one. Local tradition says that Carnival in Venice began to be celebrated after an important victory of the Republic, after a victory over the Patriarchate of Aquileia, that same neighboring city where tradition claims that St. Mark was bishop around the year 60 AD. Amen. People enjoyed Carnival, keeping the tradition alive for centuries, until in 1797, after Napoleon conquered Venice, ending the Republic and transferring its ownership to the Holy Roman Empire. Well, then came the German emperor named Francis II, who decided to put an end to the festival. Of all these fascinating masks, some funny, others scary, here in Venice, the one that interested me the most, that caught my attention, was this one, because it has an incredible story. It's the doctor's mask.
The medico della peste, as they say in Italian, because at the time of the plague, around the year 1350, the doctors, and they weren't always doctors, sometimes volunteers, would wear masks like this so they could visit patients and not get infected. It's very similar to what we recently experienced with our pandemic. However, back then it was much bigger. More than 75 million people died according to the most conservative estimates. It could have been even more than that.
But it became a kind of terrifying mask because it was also terrifying to see the arrival of the doctor. He would arrive at the houses to count the dead, to find out who was sick. You really don't want to see a creature like that in front of you, right? But at the Venice Carnival, it makes a lot of sense. And I felt like going out into the street like that.
Scaring people. Are you scared? Are you afraid one of these will show up in front of you? Bye.
Another popular craft that has become a trademark of Venice is handcrafted glasswork. The artisans live and work on two islands that make up the Venetian archipelago, the similarly named islands of Murano and Burano. It's amazing to think that glassmaking originated back in the time of Jesus, during the Roman Empire. Remember that in Pompeii, the city that was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius in 79, many glass artifacts were found. But it was here in Venice that this craft truly became an art form, glassmaking, with pieces that are small works of art. And all of them here are made on the island of Murano, which is part of the archipelago that forms Venice. So, as we take in everything we're seeing, we're amazed by all this beautiful glasswork with all these colors. They've got everything here, right? They even make household items, glasses, but there are some pieces that are truly amazing. The gondolas, which used to be the city's taxis, well, now they're a tourist attraction. It's expensive to take a gondola ride. No less than 80 euros, about 400 reais per person. It's a matter of budget. Venice really is a great sight, a trip to a beautiful era that will never return. And it lives up to all its nicknames. Queen of the Adriatic, Floating City, La Serenissima,